Let me now turn to Dr. Bulama Bukati for your opening statements. Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much, Professor, and your team. I'm very happy to have joined this panel, and I am looking forward to an insightful conversation. Majid has done an elaborate introduction. Some of his arguments I found very difficult to follow, and some of them I disagree entirely. But I would focus mostly on what I thought I would present as my opening, and then we can discuss some of the issues he raises in the next section. Now, the first point I want to start by making is that Nigeria is facing serious security challenges. That's not in doubt. Communities, Muslim and Christians alike, have been attacked. Thousands have been killed every year. Homes have been destroyed, livelihoods have been destroyed, and millions are currently internally displaced in our country, especially in the northern part of Nigeria. This conversation shouldn't have been about which community suffered more or is suffering more, but should have been more about what are the root causes, what are the drivers, what are the symptoms and complications, and how do we tackle the crisis. Unfortunately, because of some of the recent comments from the United States of America, we cannot run away from discussing the numbers. We shouldn't be discussing numbers. An attack on one Nigerian should be an attack on all Nigerians. Killing one Nigerian should be a threat to all Nigerians, and all Nigerians should come together, unite, and fight whoever is killing any Nigerian, regardless of the faith of the Nigerian that has fallen victim. But because of the situation we have found ourselves, we have to discuss the numbers. And Professor, I agonize discussing the numbers because I have never seen Nigeria's security crisis from a religious length to discuss Christian and Muslims. We are all Nigerians. We are all human beings. We all have a right to live. We all have a right to dignity. We all have a right to enjoy Nigeria and to toil and moil together. Now, when I saw Trump's comments, it reminded me some of my work in my PhD when I was looking at my when I was doing my PhD research. Part of what I did in the PhD work was to track Boko Haram's attacks on civilians, because my PhD looks at Boko Haram's claims of fighting a religious war, and I was trying to see whether they attacked security forces more or they attacked civilians more. And in the process of that, I analyzed the major civilian locations attacked by Boko Haram between 2011 and 2020. And after intensive analysis of the Nigerian security tracker data, which is compiled by the Council on Foreign Relations, I found, for example, I tracked attacks on churches, I tracked attacks on mosques, on markets, on bus garages and others. I wouldn't go into each of them. But when it came to places of worship, between 2011 and 2020, Boko Haram attacked 83 churches. And in those 83 churches, it killed 1,521 people, according to the Nigerian security tracker data. They also, in this period, attacked 72 mosques. And in those 72 mosques, they killed 2,017 people. Now, this is within a period of 11 years, as I said, 9 years, 2011 to 2020. Now, the Nigerian security tracker data may not have captured all attacks by Boko Haram, but it is a very good data that is representative anywhere you may find it. And that was my argument in the PhD work. Now, but it is not just the Nigerian security tracker data, and it is not just my data. It is also analysis by Hilary Matfess and Jason Warner, which was published by the Combating Terrorism Center at West Point of the United States Military Academy. They were interns at the United States Military Academy at the Combating Terrorism Center, and they analyzed 283 attacks by Boko Haram, suicide attacks by Boko Haram between 2014 and 2017. And they found that of the 283 38 suicide bombings by Boko Haram, 15.55% were on mosques. 15.55% were on mosques, or they call them Muslim religious targets, while 5.04% were on Christian religious targets. 15.55% on Muslim religious targets, while 5.04% were on Christian religious targets. And there are other researches by the French, for example. These are interns in the United States, but there was another research published by IFRA, which is based in the University of Ibadan, and they used the Nigerian Data Watch or Security Watch. I can find you the correct data, and all of these are online. They are publicly available online. 3 French authors, I can give you the names if you like, analyzed Boko Haram's attacks between 2009 and 2012, and they found that for every Christian killed by Boko Haram, at least 2 Muslims have been killed. Now, I hate reciting these figures in this way because I never looked at crisis in terms of people's faith. I look at it as all of us as humans, as Nigerians who have a right to live and with dignity and with freedom. Now, no one who is claiming Christian genocide, either by Boko Haram or by other groups, can point you to a credible data that is publicly available, that is verifiable, who can give you one data point that shows that Christians suffered more than Muslims in the Boko Haram crisis. Of course, we may have all reviewed the BBC data recently. They looked at the claims that were being made of the 100 Christians killed, I think, over the last 5 years, and 100,000 Christians and 60,000 Muslims. Even if you took that, you will say, okay, 60,000 and 100,000. But the BBC tracked it, and they found that there was no credible source on which that estimate was based, the data by Inter-Society. But they went on to analyze ECLED data, which is another data I use in my PhD, and they found that over the past 5 years, because my PhD stopped 5 years ago, that is 2020, they found that over the past 5 years, around 21,000 Nigerians have been killed, and they found in the BBC report that 317 of them were Christians. I think there will be more than 317 that are Christians, but maybe they found that 317 of those whose religion have been identified in the reports. Now, what this data tells us, all of this data tells us that Christians are being killed and Muslims are being killed. And it is true that Boko Haram and other groups that we are talking about, some of them target Christians and they kill them because of their faith. But what Majid misunderstands is that Boko Haram doesn't see me or you as a Muslim. And many Muslims don't see Boko Haram as a Muslim group because they think Boko Haram misinterprets, misapplies Islamic scriptures. And so when Boko Haram kill Muslims, they say we kill them because they are non-Muslims for practicing democracy, for voting in elections, for going to secular schools, for living in a country that has secular laws instead of their interpretation of Islamic law. And so framing it as a Muslim, intra-Muslim violence, when the group itself doesn't see the Muslims they kill as Muslims, I think is mistaken. And assuming they see them as Muslims, does the fact that this is a group claiming to be Muslim, killing Muslim, does that reduce the suffering from the Muslim community? I mean, I found it very hard to follow that argument. And to be honest, that's because of the 2 reasons I mentioned. Now, there is Christian persecution in some Muslim majority states. And that's a fact. That's a fact. Unfortunately, what Majid maybe doesn't know or didn't mention, Muslim marginalization and persecution in Muslim minority states. And I am mentioning this not because it is good, it is wrong for Christians to be marginalized in Muslim communities, and it is wrong for Muslims to be marginalized in Christian majority states. Maybe some of you from the South know better than I do the fate of the Igbo minority Muslims, the minority Igbo Muslims. How are they being treated in the Igbo communities? How are Muslims treated in Muslim minority states, even in northern Nigeria like Plateau and Benue states? And why are we looking at it from all the communities it is happening? Because unless and until we understand the disease, we diagnose the disease well, our prognosis and our prescription will be wrong. And if our prognosis and prescriptions are wrong, the medicine we will prescribe will only end up hurting the body, helping the disease rather than healing the sick. And so we are facing a very serious security challenge. Muslims are being killed. Christians are being killed. Christians are being targeted in some communities for being Christians. Muslims are being targeted for being Muslims, for their interpretation of their faith in the way they did. But then, what are the root causes? Why have these groups proven to be resilient over the years? Why has the Nigerian government woefully failed to tackle these groups in the way they should be tackled? These are some of the questions I would love to go into. I can see that, Professor, you have unmuted. I think I'll stop here, just pointing that I would love to hear from Majid, for example, specific examples of where Christian citizens of the 12 states that have implemented the Sharia in northern Nigeria are treated less than the Christian citizens of those states. Because the Sharia laws of all the 12 states that you mentioned clearly say no Sharia court has jurisdiction over a Christian. And the argument Muslims make in northern Nigeria is that these are courts we want established to adjudicate our disputes. And all the Sharia courts of the state say if there is a dispute between a Muslim and a Christian, that should go to a conventional court, unless and until where the Christian himself or herself chooses to submit to the jurisdiction of the Sharia court. And I can tell you, go to Kano, you will see records of Igbo traders who are Christians going to Sharia court to submit their cases to the Sharia courts because they are conducted in local languages, not in English language like high courts, because there are less technicalities, and in many of them you don't need lawyers to adjudicate your dispute. And I think maybe we need to get better informed about some of these issues before we start making claims about them. But I would love to be corrected with specific examples of favors to Muslims, citizens of those states that are not accorded to Christian citizens of that state because of the Sharia court or Sharia laws that were introduced. I'll stop here, Professor, as I said, but there are, I'm sure, many issues to come up that we can have conversations on. Thank you very much.